Hey guys, welcome back to Pets Advice with Ashley. Thank you guys for coming back and tuning in. Just wanted to apologize for my hiatus between this video and last video. Lots of wedding planning going on. We're 3 weeks away, so in the home stretch, just finalizing details. It's been a lot, but we're almost there. Yay! Oh, and it's spooky season, my favorite time of year. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about core vaccines for dogs and cats, just typically the big ones that we always recommend. And what I mean when I say core vaccines are the ones that are always going to be given, required by boarding facilities, groomers, us, all that kind of stuff. Core vaccines are typically vaccines against highly infectious and highly contagious diseases or viruses, and those viruses are often fatal. So we'll start with puppies. When you bring your little puppy in to see us for the first time, the first vaccine they're ever going to get at 6 to 8 weeks of age is DAP. DAP is actually a 4-way vaccine. There's 4 different viruses it protects against: distemper, adenovirus, parainfluenza, and parvo. And I'm sure most of you guys have heard about distemper and parvo, but probably aren't as familiar with adenovirus and parainfluenza. Honestly, I'm not all that familiar with adenovirus and parainfluenza is either. I mean, I learned about it in school, but I've never seen it in practice. I just know that adenovirus contributes to canine hepatitis. A lot of those symptoms are fever, coughing, sneezing, diarrhea. They are more gastrointestinal symptoms than like you would see in parainfluenza or like distemper. But there's also a telltale sign that a pet is suffering from adenovirus because, again, hepatitis is affecting the liver, so the skin's gonna be yellow. And then I always learned in school of the blue eye, like literally the white part of the eye has a blue tinge. Again, I've personally never seen it in practice. Other vet techs, veterinary professionals out there, if you have, please hit me up about it. I'd like to learn more about adenovirus. And then parainfluenza is one of the viruses that contributes to kennel cough. Kennel cough is just a blanket term for upper respiratory infection in canines, but parainfluenza virus is one of the leading contributors. We'll talk about kennel cough and that vaccine another time because, again, it's lots of different things contribute to kennel cough, but parainfluenza will be one of the #1 viruses that contributes to that. Again, just upper respiratory infections, coughing, sneezing, drainage from eyes, nose, that sort of thing. We'll jump into distemper, parvo, because that's what I know the most about, and those are the 2 big ones that this vaccine prevents against. So distemper, nasty little virus. They do get infected from airborne water droplets, water particles. It's definitely an aerosol transmission, so that's why like boarding facilities highly recommend it. Distemper will first present as just an upper respiratory infection, coughing, sneezing, goopy eyes, but quickly transitions into more neurological. They start having seizures or tremors. It's sad when these little puppies come in. I've seen distemper once in practice, and it was from a male puppy. So stop buying your puppies at pet stores because they're often coming from puppy mills. This case of the puppy that we saw was from a pet store. I won't blast the name out there, but the puppy ultimately did not make it. But again, vaccinating at the earliest at 6 weeks of age the disease is 100% preventable. Not only do our pets get distemper, wildlife can actually get distemper, raccoons, foxes, that kind of stuff. So if you're around wildlife in that sort of sense, like if it's in your backyard, it's also, good to have your pet vaccinated if they're messing around with wildlife, hunting, that sort of thing. As I mentioned before, distemper prognosis is pretty poor to grave. Most of these kids don't survive, and if they do survive distemper, they're going to have lifelong symptoms like difficulty walking, maybe some epilepsy, maybe some facial tremors, that sort of thing. We'll just drive right into parvo. I cannot express how much I hate this virus. It's a sad virus, and it's the one all of you hear about. Parvo is transmitted, kind of gross, through fecal to oral route. So the virus is out in the world, and your puppy's out there sniffing around and ingest some of the fecal particles, and that is why we are so adamant about you treating your puppies as little tiny human babies. Like, don't take them out, don't walk them, don't let them sniff in your neighbor's yard or anything like that, because parvovirus is pretty difficult to kill in the environment. It's pretty hardy little guy. It can survive out in the yard for a little while, especially, and even if you bleach. So parvovirus is more of the gastrointestinal disease. The puppies actually don't die from the virus itself. The virus actually destroys the lining of the intestines and the gastrointestinal tract, so puppies cannot absorb their nutrients or absorb any water. What really hit home when I saw pictures of healthy cells from the GI tract to parvo cells from the GI tract, it's very eye-opening. If you're science at all, like, look that up. It completely destroys those cells, so the puppies have no way to get any nutrition. We've saved quite a few puppies from parvo, and the biggest thing is early detection and fluids, and get those puppies to eat. You may have to take them to the hospital so we can start a feeding tube. Puppies need nutrition and fluids to survive this disease. So just be hyper vigilant when you have a puppy. Don't take them out until they are fully vaccinated. Again, this DAP series will be repeated throughout their lifetime. If you're pretty good about getting your pets vaccinated at the same time every year, we can make distemper parvo a 3-year vaccine, especially in the older adults, like the 9-10-year-old. Again, just because they are 9 or 10 doesn't mean they're not going to get distemper or parvo. It's not as likely. It's just more puppies with immunocompromised, because they're not fully vaccinated. Anyway, segueing into kittens. So when the kitten comes in at 6 weeks of age, their first vaccine they're ever going to get is FVRCP. FVRCP, there's 3 viruses in that vaccine, and that protects your kitten against feline viral rhinotracheitis, which is the biggest contributor to feline herpes. Honestly, most cats have a herpes strain dormant in their system at some point in their life, but this vaccine kind of helps the infection not be as severe. I'm sure you've gotten a kitten from like your neighbor, or you found a kitten in the dumpster and their eyes are just so goopy and their nose is all sniffly, but they're still running around like a crazy little kitten. That's the herpes virus. So this vaccine will help lessen those symptoms. Calicivirus is similar to rhinotracheitis, except that there's more like oral symptoms, like they'll get these ulcers in their mouth. I really haven't seen calicivirus, but I've heard all about it from people I know that work in like shelter medicine. Also, then there's panleukopenia. Panleukopenia is the big one. It's like the kitten version of parvo. I've seen this a few times. Panleukopenia medically means an overall decrease in the white blood cells. So this virus just attacks the bone marrow, so kittens can't produce enough white blood cells to protect themselves from these upper respiratory infections that kittens are pretty susceptible to getting. Cats themselves are pretty susceptible to upper respiratory infections. So this virus helps with that. Kitten, so we start your kitten off with this series at 6 weeks of age. Just like puppies, they'll be repeated every 3 weeks until they're 16 weeks of age. Now the big guy, rabies. Everybody knows what rabies is. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it, except I'm just going to briefly talk about how super dangerous of a virus it is. Like, I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys that. Rabies is almost completely eradicated in the U.S. in domesticated animals, but there's, we still got a lot of wildlife. The biggest contributor to rabies in the U.S. is bats, even though I love them. Bats that scared me in school. They, when you go into the vet tech program or any veterinary program, they sit you down and they talk to you about rabies for a good hour and a half. They're like, sure you want to do this? Because you're going to be the population that is most susceptible to this virus. And they broke down the wildlife, the most common wildlife in Texas, because, that's where I'm at, in Texas that contribute, that carry rabies, and it's bats, possums, foxes, raccoons, all that kind of thing. Contrary to everybody's belief, I didn't honestly know it until I started school. Only mammals carry rabies and can get rabies and can transmit rabies. So you're not going to get rabies from your chicken, you're not going to get rabies from the bird or any reptiles or anything like that. It's strictly a mammalian virus. So, and you actually, I always learned as a kid that if an animal scratches you, you can get rabies, but that's not true. Rabies is transmitted through saliva and cerebral spinal fluid. So you can indirectly, I guess, if like an animal scratches you and then their saliva drips down in it, that would be a way. But like directly scratching you, unless they've like just licked their paws, like that's not a way of transmission. It's strictly saliva, cerebral spinal fluid. So don't get bit by wildlife. So we vaccinate for rabies because it's a state law, and it's zoonotic, meaning it's transmitted from animals to people. So, but they have to be at least 12 weeks of age to receive that vaccine. And then again, at that point, it is a state law, it's a state requirement, unless a veterinarian has exempted your pet from getting the rabies vaccine for whatever reason. It is 100% regulated by state law. So, rabies, again, is acute progression encephalitis. So when you think of rabies, you think about like the snarling, like, Old Yeller type rabies situation. But the biggest clue that I learned of rabies is a change in behavior. So think about a skunk or a raccoon. They're nocturnal animals and they don't like people. They're scared of us. So I've always learned that if you see a raccoon or a skunk out in the open during the day where people can see it, you run the other direction because that thing is probably rabid. The biggest rabies incubation time can vary because it depends on how far the bite is from the spinal cord and the brain. So like if you get bit on like your ankle, how long is it going to take the virus to travel from your bite wound to your spinal cord? And you typically aren't going to see any symptoms until it reaches the spinal cord. So it's best that if your dog or you gets bit by a wild animal or a dog that you're unsure of the vaccination status, you should probably just go to the hospital, just to be safe, because only one person in history has ever recovered from rabies, and it was like this little girl. It's kind of interesting story. I'm gonna look it up one day, maybe post it in the comments. Yeah, that's rabies, and that's the core vaccines we recommend for our domesticated kiddos. I'll have another series where I talk about elective vaccines, because there's only one elective vaccine for cat and there's like 5 or 6 for dogs. So I'll jump into that because there are some elective vaccines that I don't think should be elective. Anyway, that's my talk on vaccines. Hope you learned a little something. If you have any questions, as always, drop them in the comments, shoot me a message, anything like that. So just wanted to get a video out for you guys real quick before wedding stuff kind of kicks it into high gear. I will soon, I promise, be making a breed breakdown. I'll start my series of breed breakdowns. I just don't know where to start. So y'all just drop suggestions on what breed do you think I should start with. Full disclosure, I probably won't cover anything doodle because a doodle is just a designer mutt. Okay. I'll get on that soapbox later. Anyways, thanks you guys for tuning in. As always, like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys later.